and welcome to Australia's biggest botch jobs, where we expose the biggest miscarriages of justice of our time. I'm your host, Willow J. Conway. Tonight's episode will examine Australia's most notorious wrongful conviction. To introduce tonight's botch job, we're joined in the studio with special guest rapper MC Wilsiak.
Well, it was way back when, in 1980, a woman screamed out, "A dingo took my baby!" She was camping with her fam at NT's Uluru in the middle of the desert underneath the full moon. Little did she know she would divide the nation and come under much future interrogation. Lindy Chamberlain become a household name, and her trial would rise to international fame. You see, a dingo got teeth, a dingo got claws, but a dingo can't be charged under Australian laws. Not everyone believed it was the cute desert pup. Detective Lincoln got thinking, Lindy made it all up. It was a trial by media for everyone to see, as the nation wondered what the outcome would be. Not just one trial, but 2 and 3. Let's look at number 1, where the funk begun.
Thank you, MC Wilsiak, and yes, she was given creative license. The Lindy Chamberlain case withstood 32 years, not 3 but 4 coronial inquests, 1 trial and a royal commission. This highly complex case divided opinions throughout the world and raised many questions regarding policing in Australia. How did the police respond to this event? How did the community react? And what has Australian policing learned from this infamous event? To provide some background and to help answer some of these questions, we're joined live with Detective Senior Sergeant Will J.C.
Evening, pleasure to be here.
Can we begin by giving the viewers some insight into this event and how it played out?
Certainly. Well, on August 17, 1980, Azaria, the baby of Lindy and Michael Chamberlain, was taken by a dingo while the Mount Isa family were on holiday in Uluru. Now, Frank Morris was the first investigator to arrive to the scene, followed by several other officers who were called. Now, dingo prints were noted around the tent where Azaria was taken and in other areas of the campsite. There was nothing in reports that suggested any suspicion. In fact, Inspector Gilroy had contacted the station saying there was no reason to doubt that a dingo had taken the baby.
Now, Detective, did any of the officers present on the night find any evidence that might suggest human involvement?
No. The Chamberlain's car was searched, no blood was found. Inspector Morris did notice blood on a rug in the tent, but did not take the rug for evidence, nor any other evidence that could have been vital. Now, a week after Azaria disappeared, her jumpsuit, singlet and nappy were found in the area of Uluru by a hiker. Now, this evidence was collected by Morris and would become a pivotal piece of the trial. The Chamberlains were not at this point suspects.
So how did Lindy go from being innocent to being the suspect of a murder investigation?
Well, if we have a look at the first coronial inquest, which began December 20th, 1980, it concluded with Coroner Dennis Barrett's findings that Azaria had been taken and presumably killed by a dingo. He also criticised the Northern Territory Police Forensic Unit for their poor practice. Now, the Northern Territory Police reacted to the criticism. Now, a secret team of investigators was formed, known as Operation Ochre, and was led by Detective Senior Sergeant Graham Charlwood, who had recently taken over the investigation. And the team proceeded to find as much evidence as they could to convict Lindy of murder.
And why weren't the police satisfied with the coroner's findings?
Well, by this stage, many police had begun to suspect Lindy and believed that she had fooled them. Their forensic team had found that Azaria's jumpsuit and singlet did not contain any dingo saliva, nor was ripped or torn in a way a dingo would have done so. Lindy had insisted that Azaria was wearing a matinee jacket on the night, which would explain why there was no saliva on the jumpsuit. Now, the matinee jacket, however, had not been found. The police wanted to convict Lindy, so on September 1981, the police searched the Chamberlain's house for any evidence they could find to convict her. Lindy had previously presented them with the baby space blanket, which appeared to have dingo prints on it, but when it was brought forward as evidence, the dingo prints had been removed. Now, the jumpsuit was also examined under expert forensic procedures and revealed a small handprint in blood. Now, the Chamberlain's car was taken and dismantled, and scientific evidence revealed there to be large amounts of fetal blood within the car. As a result of the second inquest, which opened in Alice Springs in December 1981 before coroner Jerry P. Galvin, this evidence was enough for Galvin to commit Lindy for trial of murder and Michael, her husband at the time, as an accessory after the fact.
Am I right in saying that the Chamberlain's defence team did not have access to the forensic evidence brought before the coroner?
That's right. They were forced to cross-examine complex scientific evidence without having any prior knowledge of it.
And then the trial began in the Darwin courthouse on September the 13th, 1982, before Justice James Muirhead. Now, what did the prosecutors say was Lindy's motive?
Well, there was no motive, there was no body, no weapon, no confession, no witnesses. All they had was expert forensic evidence, testimonies that police had gathered from expert forensic scientists such as UK Professor James Cameron and junior forensic Dr. Joy Cool. So they formulated motives such as Lindy was possessed by Satan, she had postnatal depression, she wanted notoriety, she was an evil witch, she sacrificed Azaria as part of a religious ritual offering, their son did it and they were covering up for him, or just simply she was insane.
And how did the media react?
Oh, the media thrived. The prosecutors presented a theory that Lindy had taken Azaria into the passenger seat of their car, slit the baby's throat with scissors and nail clippers, then stuffed the body in Michael's camera bag. Now, here was a young woman, a mother, a Seventh-day Adventist, on trial for brutally murdering her 9-week-old daughter. The perfect backdrop for a trial by media. Now, the community became involved. People were affected. Everyone had their own theories and people took sides and watched the trial play out on their televisions, in their newspapers. Lindy was demonised as well as supported. So when she was convicted of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment, there was cheering in the streets as well as anger and tears.
Now, Lindy begins her prison sentence in Darwin's Berrima prison after being convicted on October 29th, 1982. Then, in an extraordinary turn of events, following a series of failed appeals, a UK tourist, David Brett, falls to his death while climbing Uluru in January 1986. During a search for his body parts, which police believe may have been taken by dingoes, Azaria's matinee jacket is found in a dingo lair. Now, this evidence was enough to exonerate Lindy, and the third inquest on September the 15th, 1988, held at the Northern Territory Court of Criminal Appeals, quashed all convictions against her. Now joining us in the studio is criminologist Dr. Willow to discuss wrongful convictions and what changed in Australian policing since the Lindy Chamberlain case.
Well, wrongful convictions are when a person is convicted of a crime they did not commit, and they can occur for a number of reasons, including racism, eyewitness misidentification, false confessions, bad lawyering, and in the case of Lindy Chamberlain, inaccurate forensic evidence and police mismanagement. So in Australia, 22% of wrongful convictions were due to forensic error or misleading forensic evidence, and 55% were due to police misconduct or overzealousness. Now, in Lindy's case, we see both errors. The police were overzealous and they had tunnel vision. They went from having an open mind to targeting an individual while discrediting exculpatory evidence. They desperately wanted to convict Lindy.
After Lindy's exoneration, the very evidence that convicted her was later found to be highly flawed.
Yes, the large amounts of fetal blood that were found in the car turned out to be a manufacturing sound deadening emulsion called Dufix 101, and the lab slides that showed the fetal blood were sample display slides and not the original slides, which had consequently been destroyed. Forensic scientist James Cameron admitted the bloodied handprint on Azaria's clothing was not tested, and he had only assumed it was blood. Well, it was later revealed to be red desert dust. And the baby's clothes were consistent with a dingo attack, and it was found that dingoes are capable of taking babies. In fact, Aboriginal witnesses had verified this, but they were excluded from the trial.
So what was learned from this, and what changes have occurred following this case?
Well, following the Royal Commission of Inquiry into the Chamberlain convictions, in which Justice Trevor Morley found the evidence to be insubstantial, concerns around the use, or rather misuse, of scientific forensic evidence grew and new specialised organisations were formed. Smansville, the senior managements of Australia and New Zealand forensic laboratories, developed in 1992 with a focus towards standards and standardisation, and the National Institute of Forensic Science, NIFS, was established as a national common police service to develop and ensure quality research, training, education and standardisation of forensic science amongst all states and territories. New legislation forced changes in Australia, and we saw Australia developed from being perceived internationally as, well, having poor forensic policing and resources to becoming one of the most recognised in the world. Now, the Chamberlain case became this epicentre for change, creating new landscapes for forensic science. Crime scenes are now handled with precaution and provisions to ensure lab evidence isn't tampered with, and a specialised laboratory has been created allowing access to defence teams.
Well-developed forensic organisations headed by police are now in force, but are we still seeing wrongful convictions and miscarriages of justice?
Well, investigations are now more thorough, but as forensics is still relatively new and the science is constantly evolving, there are still wrongful convictions occurring. However, if we look back to the Lindy Chamberlain case and what was learned, then we can definitely see improvement in policing practices, how crime scenes are managed and the resources now available.
Thank you, Dr. Willow. I'd like to conclude tonight's episode with a mention of the fourth and final coronial inquest into the death of Azaria Chamberlain. In 2012, Elizabeth Morris SM found Azaria was taken by a dingo and the cause of the death was a dingo attack. Lindy Chamberlain, now Lindy Chamberlain Creighton, can hopefully get the closure she deserves. Thanks for joining us tonight, and we look forward to seeing you next week for our special episode, The Trial of Edward Splatt. Until then, stay safe and be well.